You're listening to the Tarot Diagnosis. I'm your host, Shannon. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, and I also happen to have a love for tarot. Each episode, I invite you to reflect with me as I work to demystify the tarot and the human experience, all while exploring tarot's connection to mental and emotional health. While this podcast may feel therapeutic, it is not meant to take the place of psychotherapy. So grab your cards and join me as I work to create a pathway to better understand ourselves and those around us. This is a really special episode because it's the 100th episode of the Tarot Diagnosis, which is just so wild to me. I remember when I first had the idea to do this podcast, I had told my former co-host, we only need to commit to like 12 episodes. Let's just see if we enjoy it and if other people enjoy it and find value in it. And, fast forward 88 now additional episodes, a really fun membership community, and now manning this thing solo. But I have loved every single second of it. So back when the Tarot Diagnosis first became an idea, we were in the thick of the pandemic, and I was really needing some sort of intellectual and creative outlet. And it really just seemed like this would be the outlet that I needed. And it turned out it definitely was, because this podcast and the community fill my soul with so much joy and inspiration and curiosity. So thank you to all of you who listen and utilize the resources and find value in this project, because I really can't even imagine my life without it now. And I feel so lucky to have made some really incredible connections with folks in the community who have since become really wonderful friends. I also want all of you to know that you have also been a huge part of my own personal growth and healing journey the last few years, as well as a huge part of the evolution of my personal tarot practice. So thank you 100 times. Thank you. And because this is a really special episode, and because I sometimes feel like this project was manifested from thin air, I figured today would be a good time to talk about the concept of manifestation, the psychology behind it, and because I've been kind of going in order with the major arcana, also the role that the Empress plays in manifestation. But before we dive in, I want to pull a card to help us guide the episode. Feel free to do the same. I'm using Tarot Vintage, as always. I have this stack of other decks that live on my desk, but I'm always like, I should, grab the Wandering Star or the Somnia Tarot or Pagan Other Worlds. And I do use them occasionally, but I just always gravitate towards Tarot Vintage. All right, we got a jumper. Ooh, the Hierophant. Okay, that's exciting. It's actually been a long time since I've pulled this card. So at its core, the idea of manifestation really refers to the belief and practice of intentionally creating or attracting some sort of like goal or desire that we have. And we typically think about that through focused thought, a visualization practice, or some other act, which actually feels in alignment with the archetype of the Hierophant, because manifestation is rooted in this belief that our thoughts and emotions have this inherent power to shape our external circumstances. What's interesting about the Hierophant is the members of the Golden Dawn had named this archetype the Hierophant because it gave this card space from its Catholic origins. And because the term Hierophant means showing sacred things, which is actually really beautiful when you think about it in terms of manifestation. But because it means showing sacred things, often, we could think of the process of manifestation itself as sacred, but also then what we manifest is showing a sacred thing. So I kind of really like that the Hierophant came out to open the episode today. But I do know that for many folks, this card is often a painful or difficult card to work with because of the traditional imagery and that nod to organized religion. But I do think it could be a really powerful experience to reimagine this card, maybe as the card of manifestation. So maybe keep that in mind as we continue to work through the psychology behind manifestation. So because I wanted to also just continue going down or through the major arcana, I want to put the Hierophant and the Empress together. So when we pair the Hierophant and the Empress, there's this intersection of intention and creation. Because manifestation is about aligning ourselves with our desires and then taking action to bring those desires to fruition. So even though you might hear the term manifestation spoken about mostly in metaphysical circles or occult circles or in this esoteric sense, I think that the magic of manifestation is actually in the psychological components of the experience. And psychologically speaking, our personal belief, perceptions, and behaviors are actually the driving force behind manifestation. Because when we have an idea and believe that we can manifest, create, or somehow bring this idea into being, we actually tend to be more focused, motivated, and driven, which of course then leads to us feeling more confident in our ability to do the thing or manifest the thing. And then, we have just more awareness of what's happening around us in relation to what it is that we are trying to manifest. And all of these things are what really positively influence the likelihood of whatever it is that we're trying to manifest actually becoming a reality. Another psychological component here is attention and cognitive bias. So when we are consciously focusing on a goal or a desired outcome, we become more in tune to the opportunities that are around us, or even the resources that might be accessible to us that will allow us to support this desire or create whatever it is that we're seeking to create. So because of this, it's kind of like a form of selective attention. We end up creating this cycle where we tend to notice and take advantage of opportunities that essentially align with our desires. So, I see this a lot, and there's actually studies that focus on this, where if we physically write down something that we desire, something that we are trying to manifest, there's something about physically writing it down that has an impact on our brain. And we are, I think, like 60% more likely to actually follow through with that thing or create that thing. But I think one of the coolest components here is that we're almost creating psychological magic in the process, because by writing down what it is that we're manifesting or thinking about it or visualizing it, it turns on something in our brain that allows us to be way more aware of what we need in order to create that. So it's not that we are necessarily just manifesting something from thin air, even though it feels like it. Like I mentioned earlier, sometimes I feel like the whole tarot diagnosis just, I snapped my fingers and it became a thing. And that's not it at all. It'd be really cool, but not the actual case. So what really happened is, there was this idea, and then you think about this idea and you visualize it and you're talking about it. And the more attention you are giving to this idea, the more you are aware of resources and support that will help you bring that idea to fruition. So I don't want to take the magic out of manifestation here, though, because I think this is where the Empress energy really starts to shine. So in context of manifestation, the Empress has this nurturing energy. And that nurturing energy is a really vital ingredient when we are wanting to manifest something. Just like when we are trying to grow some sort of plant, we have to nourish the seed that we're planting. The desires and intentions that we seek to manifest also require that same nurturing environment. And I think the Empress teaches us to spend time cultivating even some self-efficacy around that and making sure that the environment that we're creating for ourselves or creating around this idea that we want to manifest is supported with healthy relationships and space for creativity and room to expand our thoughts and ideas. Because that's when manifestations can really become rooted and then blossom. Earlier, I mentioned the idea of visualization in terms of manifestation. And I think that's another really important component that the Empress brings to this topic. Traditionally, the image of the Empress shows a woman who's pregnant, sitting on this really opulent throne. She's surrounded by really lush landscape. And there are so many aspects of this imagery that point to the concept of visualization or meditation or even mental rehearsal. So when you're preparing to care for a child, you often dream about the life that they will have. You envision what it will be like being a parent, watching this human grow. I feel like it's this aspect of the Empress energy that really encourages us to visualize and cultivate this clear image of what it is that we are desiring for ourselves or others or the world around us. And I've been kind of alluding to how when we are in the process of manifesting, something gets turned on in our brain. And I think this process of visualization is a really huge component to that, because when we imagine our goals or desires or needs as if they've already been realized or created, there's so much inherent power in the act of visualization, because it really allows us to imagine whatever goal, dream, or desire that we have becoming a reality. And we know how our brains function. Like if we are thinking about something we can do, we're more likely to do it. If we are thinking about something we can't do, then we are more likely to stay stagnant. And it seems like this process or practice really aligns with parts of the subconscious mind. And again, that goes back to this kind of like unlocking of something within our brain or within our mind, because studies do show there is this increased likelihood of something materializing or manifesting because we are way more likely to notice different avenues, support, or guidance that is going to help us create what it is that we are seeking to create. And another kind of ingredient here is because we are taking time to prioritize that. Even if we're just taking time to prioritize thinking about what it is that we're hoping to manifest. Because if we hadn't prioritized thinking about it, it wouldn't exist at all. Another really cool psychological function of manifestation and the visualization process is not only does the visualization increase our levels of awareness to things that will help us meet our goal or create something, it also actually improves certain motor skills, definitely our confidence, and definitely our motivation. And what's really neat, there's a whole sect in psychology that focuses on sports and performance psychology. And this type of manifestation and visualization technique is utilized a lot in this field. And they tend to rely really heavily on the benefits of visualization and mental rehearsal. Mental rehearsal is very much like visualization. It's when you have a task at hand that you are supposed to be accomplishing and you envision yourself completing that task favorably. So in order to kind of like manifest positive performance, basically. So it's actually kind of funny if you think about manifestation and visualization and the psychological component. It's kind of like athletes have their own kind of covert brand of witchcraft. It's really, really cool. So I've really been kind of focusing on this internal aspect of manifestation and the thought process and visualization. But I do think it's important to note that the psychological and even like research-based aspects of manifestation definitely exist and show favorable outcomes, but we still need to be critical of that, because even though belief, attention, and visualization have really strong positive effects on our motivation and our ability to create whatever it is that we're seeking to create, we still need to balance those practices with realistic goal setting and dedicated work. So this brings me to the Eight of Pentacles, which really teaches us that manifestation is not merely just this act of wishful thinking that I think you could easily take what I've been saying as, oh, wow, she's just talking about wishful thinking. Sure, that's definitely a component, but the energy of the Eight of Pentacles is also so valuable here because this card really reminds us that true manifestation comes from our willingness to put in the necessary effort. And it's also about not just putting in the effort, but then refining that effort and refining our intentions and all of the actions that we are taking along the way. I feel like the energy in this card is also about focusing our attention on what it is that we're hoping to manifest, but also focusing our attention on how we can actively pursue the things that we need to pursue in order to manifest that. I think it's all about honing abilities and both gathering and utilizing resources. I think something else important with the Eight of Pentacles is that it acts as this reminder that manifestation is not just about the end result. And I think so many of us are very outcome driven and we get really caught up in just wanting to get from point A to point Z. And we don't think about, the rest of the alphabet or the rest of the process in between. But manifestation really is a process. And that process does unfold gradually. Even though it feels like we just started from point A and got to point Z, we didn't. There was a whole path, multiple paths, detours that we had to take, throughout that journey. And I feel like we can look at the pentacles nailed to the tree as maybe a tangible representation of that process. They're almost like personified stepping stones toward the end result of our manifestation. But each pentacle or each stepping stone is a really vital ingredient to the process. And in this card, we see the person really immersed in working on that next pentacle or stepping stone or process of their manifestation. And there's this hyper focus that is present, or they're very mindful of being in the present moment and not just focused on the end result. And I think by immersing ourselves in the present and appreciating the growth and the learning that has occurred along the way. I mean, look, this person has, the pentacles they've already created directly in front of them. So when they do come up for air, so to speak, they are reminded, oh, look at how far I've come, or look at everything I've already created while I'm working on this next step. I feel like seeing that and being exposed to and reminded of that learning and growth process, we give ourselves permission to cultivate this sense of gratitude and a level of contentment that I think just enhances our experience with manifestation. Because otherwise, we might get frustrated with ourselves of, I have to create 6 more stepping stones or whatever. But when we allow ourselves to sit back and say, oh, wow, we've already created 6 or we've already created 7, that's when we feel a sense of accomplishment, even if we have not completed the very end of or gotten to the very end of our manifestation goal. Beyond hard work and gratitude, I think we also need to recognize external forces or factors that are at play that are often beyond our control, especially something like privilege. And I think privilege and circumstance is actually a topic of discussion that gets ignored a lot when we're having conversations about manifestation, because privilege operates both consciously and unconsciously. And there's this disparity and inequality that is then created, especially within our society and within a lot of folks' ability to personally experience manifestation. If we look at the intersection of manifestation and privilege, We experience a lot of complexity and a lot of nuance. And just the presence of privilege greatly impacts our capacity to manifest. But at the same time, the process of manifestation is truly influenced by the advantage or disadvantage of whether privilege is present. And there's a lot of systemic barriers that are rooted in privilege that impede manifestation for a lot of folks. And these barriers are what end up limiting access to resources and support. Those two really important ingredients or components I talked about earlier when we're manifesting something. So it can be really easy to throw around the term manifest or, just manifest what you need, or, have you thought about manifestation, without really peeling back the layers to see how manifesting is even possible for us, but maybe not for someone else. Because earlier I was talking a lot about how when we are in the process of visualization or mental rehearsal, we become more attuned to our surroundings and we are able to identify sources of support or ways to gather resources in order to help us accomplish whatever it is that we are seeking to accomplish. But once we start talking about privilege, sometimes even though our brain is attuned to our surroundings, we still don't have access to support or the resources that we need. So this is why a conversation on privilege and circumstance, especially around the idea of manifestation, is important, because it's not as simple as just thinking our way through something. And this feels like a really good time to reinvite the Empress back into the discussion, because while the Empress isn't the antidote to lack of privilege, I think there's an encouragement to seek out some guidance or care and support within the energy of this card. Because there's a sense of responsibility that I think is inherent within the Empress. Because, if you just look at the card, it looks quite privileged. And with privilege does come responsibility. And if we're going to talk about the Empress as a symbol of privilege, she has a role to utilize her power and her resources for good, which includes helping others by advocating for them and uplifting marginalized voices. The Empress is then called to listen empathetically and attentively. She's called to educate herself about inequality and systemic barriers, and then actively work towards dismantling those. The energy of the Empress has huge responsibility and huge power to help create an environment of inclusivity, really, and equity. I think within that, manifestation becomes accessible for more folks. But that means we have to look at our own selves and the role that we're playing. How much of us exists within the Empress, or how much of the Empress exists within us? What is our level of privilege? I think this really speaks to the importance of, again, evaluating where we are in our own manifestation journey and the beliefs we have about the process of manifestation, and how much of those beliefs are rooted in our own privilege or rooted in our own circumstances. And then, in what ways do we need help and assistance? And in what ways can we offer help and assistance? Because in the end, the most amazing part of this is being able to see and feel the power and magic of manifestation, whether it's coming from us or coming from someone around us. Thank you so much for listening to the Tarot Diagnosis. You can follow us on Instagram and TikTok under the handle @TheTarotDiagnosis, and join us while we pull daily cards and explore tarot and mental health in between podcast episodes. You can also subscribe to our podcast to make sure that you never miss an episode. If you have a topic or question that you'd like for us to explore on the podcast, you can contact us directly on our website, www.thetarotdiagnosis.com.